Hello, government students. Today we're going to be talking about political parties in America. Indeed, this is going to be our focus for the next week or so. This picture is a good picture to illustrate one of the functions of political parties in America. This is taken at the end of one of the presidential nominating conventions. And when you have that last day of the convention, when the president nominee gives his big speech, and at the end there's a big party, there's balloons flying, bands playing, confetti falling. It's a big party atmosphere. And this really does demonstrate one of the roles of political parties in America, nominating candidates and getting people fired up for the election. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to begin today by looking at the definition of a political party. I want to make clear that the definition of a party in America might be a little bit different than the definition of a political party in other countries. So we're focusing on the American definition here. And here's what I have here. I think this is a very good definition. An organization that runs candidates for political office and coordinates the actions of officials operating under the party banner. Now, notice what this definition doesn't talk about. It doesn't talk about what the candidates or what the parties believe in. It's really focused on power. It's focused on running candidates for office, getting them in office, and coordinating their activities once they're in office. And it's really all about power, getting people into office, wielding power. It's not really about, what people believe so much, which is a big difference in America compared to other countries. So characteristics of political parties in our country, first and foremost, ideology is secondary to political power. Ideology, that's, your political beliefs. That isn't the big deal. The big deal with political parties isn't what they believe, it's how they get power. They may use ideology, what they believe in, as a tool to get power, but ultimately their goal is to obtain political power, get people in office. And ideology is just one way they do that. Parties in America are very decentralized. It's not a hierarchical structure at all. Very decentralized. We'll get into that a little bit later this week. And finally, membership is very informal in American political parties. You don't sign a card or anything. You don't have a membership card. You don't sign a document declaring yourself to be a member of a political party. Today I can say I'm a Democrat. Tomorrow I can say I'm a Republican. It's very informal. It's that informal. You are whatever you say you are in America. There's no formality to it whatsoever. And finally, political party organizations have very little power over the elected officials that are members of their party. So, for example, the Democratic Party really has no power over Joe Biden, Democratic President of the United States, nor did the Republican Party have any power over Donald Trump. In fact, it's the opposite. Those who win elections wield power over the party itself, not the other way around. What do parties do in America? Good question. First of all, they obviously raise money. This is probably the main deal that parties do, is they raise money for candidates. And then they choose the candidates who are going to run for office. And then they serve as a watchdog. This is an interesting term. Think about places that might have a watchdog. A watchdog is used for what purpose? To keep the bad guys out, right? Well, political parties do that too, especially the political party that is not currently in power. The minority party that is out of power will serve as a watchdog over the party that is in power. So, for example, as soon as there's the slightest whiff of corruption among the ruling party, you can guarantee that the party out of power is going to bring that corruption or potential corruption to light. They're going to make sure that the American people are aware of something bad going on with the party in power. That's the watchdog function, to to keep people honest, So think about in the previous administration with Donald Trump. Donald Trump was twice impeached because the Democratic Party, serving as the watchdog, felt that he was abusing his power, doing things he shouldn't have done and doing it in a corrupt way. Now, obviously, Trump was not convicted in his impeachment, but he was impeached, and impeachment tends to, bring bad stuff to light, whether or not the candidate is ever kicked out of office. Political parties inform and stimulate the electorate. They raise all that money, and the first thing we talked about, and then they start buying advertisements. That's informing the public, buying ads, telling what the party believes in, and stimulating the electorate, trying to get people to go out and actually vote for their candidates, get them excited about the candidates, informing and stimulating the electorate. So TV ads we're talking about, radio ads, we're talking about billboards on major thoroughfares and highways, signs in people's yards. All of these are meant to inform people about who's running, what they're running for, what they stand for, and getting people excited about going out and voting for these candidates. All right, let's change topic a little bit. Let's take a look at this diagram that shows the German Bundestag. The Bundestag is the parliament of Germany. Notice the colors there. The colors represent the different parties, political parties that are represented in the German Bundestag. What stands out to you there, and how is it different in Germany, say, than it is in the United States? Well, the obvious answer there, I think, is that there are 6 political parties represented in the German Bundestag. Compare that to the American Congress, where there are only 2 political parties represented in the legislative branch Congress of the United States. We have in the United States a 2-party system. Most democracies, representative democracies in the world, have more than 2 parties. We, however, only have 2. So I want us to look at why that's the case. We're going to take a look at our 2-party system in America, which is rather unique. Only Republicans or Democrats have a realistic chance of winning major elections in our system. So why is that? And there's really 3 main reasons. First of all, history and tradition. It's always been that way. We've always had 2 parties in America. We always will have 2 parties. It's just the way it's always been. Another reason is that the electoral system itself favors the 2-party system. There's 3 reasons for that. So let's take a look at the 3 reasons that our electoral system favors 2 parties. First of all, we have winner-take-all elections. Think about the House of Representatives in the United States. We've got 435 seats. Each of those 435 representatives represents a specific geographic area, which we call a district. When they run for office, whoever gets the most votes in that district wins the election. Now, in other countries, it's not a winner-take-all, okay? In here, it's a winner-take-all. You get the most votes, you won. But look at Germany. In Germany, let's say a political party gets 40% of the vote. They're going to get 40% of the seats in the German Bundestag. Another party gets 20% of the vote. That party will get 20% of the seats in the Bundestag. A party gets 8%. They get 8%. So a very small party that only gets a small percentage of the votes can still have representation in the government in systems that do not have a winner-take-all election. That's not the case here. With a winner-take-all, it really puts minor parties at a great disadvantage and kind of makes them almost not worth voting for. We also have a system in America where elections are won with a plurality of votes. Notice it says plurality, it does not say majority. A plurality means that you get more votes than anyone else. If there's 3 people running for the same office, a person can win the election without winning a majority of the votes. Bill Clinton, for example, ran. He only got 40% of the vote of the electoral college, of the people. Popular vote was only about 40%, yet he still won the election. Okay, so you can win an election even though you don't get a majority. Now, if we required a majority vote, if you had 3 people running, they would take the 2 candidates that got the most votes, and then they would run against each other to see who could get a majority. That would give a minor party, a smaller party, a greater opportunity of actually winning an election than it does when it's just whoever gets the most votes. You could have 2 relatively conservative parties running against a single liberal party. Well, the conservatives would be splitting their vote among 2 parties, and so the liberal party would win, even though there's probably more people voting for the conservative parties as a whole. So again, plurality of votes wins the election. Finally, our election laws themselves favor the major parties and put minor parties at a disadvantage. And I'll give you an example there. Let's say you want to run for president, but you're not a Republican or a Democrat. You're a libertarian, let's say. If you're running for president under the Libertarian Party, you have to get signatures on a petition in order to get on the ballot of the various states. If you cannot get a certain number of people to sign a petition putting you on the ballot, you will not show up on the ballot, and you might as well kiss the election goodbye. However, the Republicans and Democrats, they get on the ballot automatically. By law, they're going to be on the ballot, but not so if you're running for one of these smaller parties. Sorry about that interruption there. That really does put the minor party at a disadvantage. It's not fair. So why is it like that? It's like that because Republicans and Democrats actually wrote the laws, and they've written the laws to favor themselves and try to keep other parties at a weaker position. And finally, in America, there's an ideological consensus. In America, most people are kind of in the middle of the political spectrum. We have very few people who are fascist. We have very few people who are communists. We're all kind of in the middle. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are both centrist parties. Yes, the Republican Party is relatively conservative. The Democratic Party tends to be relatively liberal, but they're both within the center. You know, in the broader sense, they're both very much moderate centrist parties. And most Americans, being moderates themselves, will find some comfort level within one of those two parties. We don't feel the need as Americans to go to parties that are on the extremes of the political spectrum. I want to wrap up this video taking a look at the two parties that have existed throughout American history. So it goes really all the way back to the very earliest days of our history. From 1787 to 1789, we had two parties, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Of course, that was a short period of time. That's the period of time when we were trying to get the new Constitution up and working. Once that Constitution went into effect in 1789, the Anti-Federalists sort of lost their reason for existence. So they faded away, and we had only Federalists for a very brief period of time, but that didn't last long. The Federalist Party actually then split in the early to mid 1700s into the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Now, the Federalists in this second era are not exactly the same as the Federalists in the earlier period. For example, James Madison was obviously a Federalist in 1787 through 1789. He was the writer of the Constitution, and he was very much, campaigning to get the Constitution approved. But he was also a leader in the Democratic-Republican Party. So quite a few Federalists became Democratic-Republicans, and a whole lot of Anti-Federalists became Democratic-Republicans as well. So this period of time lasts for about 20 years or so. But then something interesting happened. We had the War of 1812, and the Federalist Party came out against the War of 1812. It came out against it very, very strongly, to the point where certain Federalists were even advocating secession from the Union. When the War of 1812 came to an end, and the last battle of the War of 1812 was an American victory, that really put the Federalists in a very, very bad light. And people looked at them, many of them, as being downright unpatriotic. And the Federalist Party was basically destroyed by their stance during the War of 1812. And so for a period of time, about 8 years or so, the Democratic Republicans were the only party in America. Sometimes when you're making your videos in school, you get interrupted by the loudspeaker. So anyway, Democratic Republicans were the single party for a brief period of time, but that didn't last very long. They split, and then we had from 1824 to 1832, a short period of time, Democrats under Andrew Jackson and National Republicans under John Quincy Adams. And the National Republicans ultimately became the Whig Party. And the Whigs had some moderate success. They won 2 presidential elections, but the Whig Party did not last long. It was destroyed by a split over the issue of slavery. And those Whigs who were against the spread of slavery actually became the Republicans. And since about the mid-1850s, we've had Democrats and Republicans. The Republicans started out as an anti-slavery party. They since have changed their ways somewhat and represent much more than just that. But with this, I'm going to stop this video, but you do have another one today I want you to watch as well. So take a look at the second video and follow the instructions in Canvas.